I'd like to thank everybody today to hear our update from Canada Nickel Company. Why invest in Canada Nickel? Three key reasons. One, we have one of the leading nickel sulfide discoveries. You get 1 or 2 great nickel sulfide discoveries per decade, and we believe Crawford will be one of those discoveries. 2, it's in a region where you can build and permit a mine about as quick as you can anywhere in the world, and we're in a location with a significant amount of infrastructure. And third, it's great to have a great project in a great location, but where you get, outsized returns is when you have a great project in a great location, when you're heading into a great market. And we believe we're going to be heading into a nickel super cycle by the middle part of this decade. In terms of the team, we've built a team from my past life with RNC Minerals, where we advanced the Dumont project from a resource stage right through to a fully permitted construction-ready project. So we have access to the skills and talent we need to be able to quickly advance this project. The thing about nickel, I'll talk about it very briefly here. Most people are pretty bullish on the metal, particularly after Elon Musk's presentation last week. Most people forget that nickel is a very high demand metal. It grows at 4 to 5% a year, which means you need to double supply every 15 years at those kind of growth rates. You can see copper and zinc is 2 or 3%. Nickel continues to grow strongly recently. And when you overlay, the historical demand growth, which has primarily been from stainless steel, with the expected growth in EVs, this is an old Glencore forecast, and you can see that they're forecasting 1.3 million tons of nickel by 2030. The reality is, this forecast is likely going to be very conservative. Tesla's Battery Day presentation indicated they were going to be producing 3 terawatts of batteries, which again, when you do the math, would indicate somewhere between 1 million to 1.5 million tons of nickel just for Tesla. When you combine that growth in EVs with the underlying growth in stainless steel, and we slowed this down to 4% growth per annum, effectively, we need to double nickel supply by 2030. And there's very few projects outside of Indonesia that are ready to go. The other thing Elon Musk mentioned in his comments on the nickel market back in July was, make environmentally friendly, make environmentally sensitive nickel. And the reason he was saying that is this simple chart here. If you look at the bar on the right, nickel supply from Indonesia, from NPI, has represented over 100% of supply growth for the past 5 years, and is going to represent the bulk of supply growth going forward. This is not what he had in mind when he was wanting to decarbonize the planet by introducing electric vehicles. In contrast, you can see on the left, sulfide mines are inherently lower carbon, and we're in a very fortunate situation. And this is why we launched our Net Zero Metals subsidiary a few months ago, is that, the host rock for our deposit naturally absorbs CO2 when exposed to air. So our tailings and waste rock will absorb CO2. We're in an area with all zero carbon hydroelectricity, and Timmins is a location that is quite comfortable with downstream processing plants. So we'll be able to build a plant to capture that off gas and route it back into our tailings and waste. The other key challenge with the nickel supply that doesn't get enough airtime is just how concentrated supply is. What a challenge is that for automakers in Europe and North America. Over half of supply is controlled by 3 countries. In contrast, Robert Friedland keeps calling nickel the new gasoline. OPEC at its peak, with all of the member countries in OPEC controlled a similar amount of nickel. And we all know what happened with oil prices in the early 70s. Investments in nickel outside of the Persian Gulf was a great investment in the early 70s. I believe investments in nickel outside these 3 countries will be an equally compelling investment. So in terms of the project, we're sitting just north of Timmins in a 100-year-old mining camp. We're sitting adjacent to a highway. We have all the major infrastructure in place, rail, road, and major community. The area itself, the reason this deposit so close to Timmins hadn't been discovered before is twofold. One, the large yellow area you see there was owned by a forestry company up until 2011, and you know, was struggling financially. So joint venturing with junior miners was not top of the list. You can see all the white dots that cover the area around it, which is all filed work with the government. The other key factor is there's no outcrop in this area. It's all covered by 30-50 meters of silt and clay. And so there was no exposed rock outcrop for people to be able to discover it earlier. This past week, we made two major announcements. One was the resource update from our drilling that we've completed since last February. We had two main goals with this resource update. One was to increase the definition and more increase the scale of the higher grade zone. We delivered that in spades. We more than doubled the size of that to over 200 million tons, grading 0.34% nickel. The other thing we wanted to do was increase the scale of the overall resource. Again, we more than doubled our inferred resource. And so now in total, we have 3.2 million tons of contained nickel. We expanded our main zone, which is where the initial resource was. And you can see to the top there, we had an initial resource definition at that point in time. And you can see that we have a number of areas still to explore on that east zone. In terms of our higher grade core, if there's one slide in the presentation to focus on, it's this chart here. So on the left, you can see the higher grade core, which was 98 million tons at 0.34%. Today, you can see where we're sitting on the right. So over 200 million tons at 0.34%. The width of it is consistently between 100 and 200 meters wide from end to end across a strike length of 1.8 kilometers, and it remains open to the west. This is going to allow us to have many, many years of much higher grade material than average go through our mill. Those of you who have been involved in any mining projects know that if you're able to fill the mill with 30% higher grade material than your average for the first 3, 5, in our case now 10 to 15 years, you're going to have a significant improvement in your overall cash flows. Here's a zoom in, and you can see both the 0.3% grade shell, and within that, we more than doubled the amount that's over in the 0.35% grade shell with over 58 million tons at 0.36%. So again, an even higher grade area to get started with. Our second big announcement of the week was a discovery of a third zone at the west end. The nice thing is, as we drilled off the main zone, you can see to the bottom right there, it aligns very closely with the blue area, which is a gravity low. You can see the massive gravity anomaly to the left side of the page, 2.5 kilometers long, 400 to 800 meters wide. Three of our first 4 holes started and ended in dunite, and you can see from the inset pictures there that there was some nice sulfide blebs there. Our first assays are from the last 20 meters of the last hole, where we intersected 0.3% material with a nice sulfur grade. Again, 0.3 with some sulfur is really the higher grade core of what we're trying to look for. We'll see what the rest of the assays come back with. I expect them to be a bunch more 0.25% material, but with that scale of anomaly that's there, it'll be a very intriguing deposit as we move forward. We've completed initial mineralogy here. Again, over almost 90% of the nickel in the higher grade core is a recoverable mineral, and about 60% in the lower grade zone is in recoverable mineral. And from our experience at Dumont, we typically got about 60 to 70% of that into a concentrate. In addition to the nickel, we have a very large PGM zone running parallel to the nickel deposit. If you think of a wall that's 3 to 5 meters wide, from surface down to a depth of 400 meters, that is running for kilometers parallel to the ore body. That's what we have both on our main zone and east zone. Again, there's a significant amount of potential on the PGM zone. You'll be hearing about that more in the coming months. In terms of our net zero, I've talked about the fact that, this is no rocket science is involved in delivering this. It's just taking advantage of mining equipment that uses electricity to the maximum extent. We have all zero carbon hydroelectricity in the area. Our tailings and waste rock absorb CO2, and Timmins is quite comfortable with downstream processing, which will allow us to capture our off gas and route it back into our tailings to capture the CO2. In terms of scale, how big can this be? Crawford is already the largest nickel sulfide discovery since the mid-70s. Given the potential at Crawford and as well in the 5 option properties, which I'm just about to show you, you can see on this chart here where we think we're going to end up. Very good company. The top left is Sudbury. The 2 dots in the middle there from 1960 are Norilsk's deposit in Siberia and Jinchuan's deposit in China. And so again, those are core assets for multi-billion-dollar companies. And again, hopefully Crawford will be a core asset for a multi-billion-dollar company, hopefully Canada Nickel at some point in the future. This chart here shows, the little dark peanut is the 900 million ton resource from our original resource estimate. You can see the area that we flew the same geophysics that we've used to unlock Crawford. We've now flown on all these other targets. Anything you see there in bright pink is potentially a nickel-bearing ultramafic, and so our belief is that we will uncover here 2 to 3 other discoveries as we begin drilling them this coming winter. In terms of market cap, we've done very well since we started trading just last February. As you can see, the Aussie nickel PGM discoveries to the right are significantly higher value than us. Again, I think why we're keen to get our PEA completed by year end is to clearly demonstrate the scale of the value that we're talking about and the real potential. And again, from my perspective, I think we can close that value gap rapidly during the next 6 months. In terms of the overall price, this is a chart really summarizing, the scarcity value and why the substantial premiums nickel sulfide assets typically trade out at. You get 1 or 2 great sulfide discoveries per decade. In the 90s, it was Voisey's Bay and Kabanga. In the late 90s, early 2000s, it was Jubilee's discovery at Cosmos, along with Lionor's discovery at Emily Ann and Maggie Hayes. And then I think, for us, a clear benchmark, and the reason why I have most of my non-real estate net worth in this company is Sirius's discovery of Nova Bollinger in 2012. In just 3 years, as they were completing a feasibility study, they were acquired for $1.8 billion by Independence Group. We already have a multiple of the resource that they had at the time they were discovered. This was not a peak in the mining cycle, and it was not a peak in the nickel market. And yet, that's the kind of valuation that a feasibility study stage asset traded out at. We'll have our PEA done by the end of this year. We'll have our feasibility study done by the end of next year. Again, really wanting to demonstrate the kind of value we think is there in the asset. We have a tight share structure. We just raised $13 million, which will see us through to the end of feasibility study in the next year. So we're well financed to deliver on our objectives during the coming 15 months. And to summarize, again, why I think Canada Nickel is one of the best investment opportunities in the mining space today. We're one of a few new nickel sulfide discoveries. 2, we're in a location where you can get a mine permitted and built. And 3, we're in an area with all the infrastructure in place to allow us to build that mine relatively cheaply. And then finally, we're doing it in a time frame where we're going to head into a new nickel super cycle by the middle part of this decade. Thank you for listening, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Look, thanks, Mark. That was a great wrap up of where you've gone in a very short period of time. Just a couple of questions. First of all, this is an area with a very large ultramafic complex that extends significantly to the east and to the north. I mean, do you feel like that there's more ground that Canadian Nickel would be thinking about locking up in this region, or do you feel comfortable with your land package as it is right now?
Yeah, we've got a pretty good set of targets already. Again, getting to one of the top 3 or 4 nickel sulfide discoveries ever, we think is possible given the land package we have. I think one of the key things is, you want the sulfur to show up into these ultramafic deposits to be able to create, and that doesn't happen very often. So again, I think as we move away from our deposits, I'm not sure, whether the potential for that sulfur is there or not. So yeah, we're keen to stay focused on the properties we've got, and then we'll see what happens as we move forward.
And then when you think about the drilling program as you progress through next next year, you know, are we going to be looking at a scenario where you just systematically drill fence between the various zones and delineate the full potential along strike?
Yeah, so there's three key objectives from the exploration program. So one is, continuing to step out from that main zone, that higher grade zone. That's obviously existing maximum value. Two is to start stepping out around Crawford, and then from there, by the time we get the geophysics back from the survey we just flew, we'll be able to start stepping out and prioritizing those other targets to be able to identify the potential in a bunch of those other areas. And then the third piece of it is that PGM zone. We hit one contact where we hit 2.5 grams across 7.5 meters, less than 100 meters deep, and then two other zones that were in the same hole. So we're going to be following up on that, and there'll be a series of drill results there because we've got an exciting PGM discovery as well as our exciting nickel discovery.
Yeah, absolutely. So that will be part of the work that you're doing through next year, and be included in the feasibility study that you're looking to deliver at the end of next year.
Exactly.
All right. And have you done any preliminary metallurgical work on the PGM style mineralization to see what kind of a flow sheet you might be looking at?
Yeah, no, not yet. We've been pretty focused on getting the nickel metallurgy done, and that'll be done by the end of the month. And then once that's phase of work's done, we'll flip over and get the PGMs done. At this point, there doesn't look like there's any should be anything challenging in terms of being able to pull it out at this point.
All right, no, that's great. Look, congratulations to you and your team on a fantastic new discovery in a great part of this country. And look, we look forward to seeing more results coming out as you continue your drilling and as you advance the metallurgy and the engineering. It's an exciting new project, and congratulations.
No, thanks. Yeah, no, we're quite excited, and thank you to everyone for taking the time to hear the story.